I want to start this episode off by playing a little shout-out tennis. Ball's in my court, but I have been listening to the new Go podcast, Don and the Q, and I've been enjoying it a lot, actually. Just listening to people talk about Go and pontificate about all the different moves and strategies and things that go into the game. It's been enjoyable. Although I like to listen when I'm driving, it's not a show about Go for Go fans away from the board, because at some point in the show they do switch to a board and you can't follow if you're not watching. So I had to pause during the episode that I was listening to, but I did go home and I was curious enough to go through the problems that they were discussing, and it was very enjoyable. I really like the fact that there were two perspectives, one from a stronger player, one from a slightly weaker player, though definitely not like a super weak player. And I love that there's another podcast out there, and because I mentioned their show, they shouted me out, so shout out to you guys over there at Don and the Q. You don't have to send the shout out back to me again. I just wanted to recognize you guys one more time in the beginning of the episode, because I know I kind of just slipped your name in there. And I wanted to give you guys my thoughts on my enjoyment of the show. So there's the ball's in your court, and you may keep it there. You're listening to Start Point, the show about Go for Go fans away from the board, where I won't be pulling out any Go boards in the middle of the show. So if you're doing chores, if you're driving, don't worry, you won't need to look at any kind of screen, at least for the time being. I don't know what the future of the show will be, but the primary reason I started Starpoint was because I really wanted to listen to stuff about Go while I was driving, and I didn't have anything. My bread and butter back then was the Pro Go Weiqi Baduk podcast, which has since been on indefinite hiatus, although the dynamic duo Gaza and Xiao Dai have appeared on All Things Go. I got two new podcasts to listen to, so it's even better. I feel like I finally have the Go content that I need when I'm driving wherever, and I don't have to necessarily listen to my own voice. And Spotify has taken away my ability to review my episodes on the Spotify app for some reason. I can't listen anymore, so I'm just winging it now, making sure my edits are okay. So if you guys hear any hiccups or weird repetitions, or me just kind of clearing my throat and talking about garbled nonsense, then let me know, because or maybe just let me live in peaceful ignorance. I don't know. But anyway, today's episode is about, well, I'm just going to be throwing a whole bunch of questions into the ether, because I noticed there are some strong players in the audience for Starpoint, and I might as well take advantage and see if anyone will bite, see if anyone will take the bait and answer these hard-hitting questions I have that I might want to ask if I had a conversation with a strong player. Maybe a Don player, maybe even stronger than Don, but I invite anybody to answer any of these questions. But these are the questions that I came up with for myself that I would find interesting to know what the answer would be from a stronger player's perspective. And I'll give you also my thoughts on some of these questions as well, so we can have this open discussion. I have quite a list of questions here. Let's see. What do you do when there's nothing to do? I find myself in this position a lot when I am playing a game. Things are settled. My opponent has no weak groups. I have no weak groups. There are no big, obvious points for territory. They've all kind of just been taken. Now there's just kind of an interesting and yet awkward pattern of stones on the board, and you just can't tell where the biggest move is. What do you do? Is there a way to break down that problem? What is the thought process that you should go through when you find yourself in a situation when you feel like there's really nothing really big to do on the board. Are you supposed to just try to quietly see if something happens by playing very modest moves, or should you try to shake things up and make things happen? I guess that's kind of dependent on whether you're losing or winning. So for that question, I mean, I don't know the answer, but if I had to answer it for some player, I would maybe fall back on two options. One would be, even if it's a small gain, just take the small gain. Number two, even if you think a group is safe, or you feel like it doesn't, or another group is weak, if you think a group is safe, whether it's yours or the opponent's, put a little more tension on that group, even though it's not Sente. Those are the two options that I would think of, right? Just like a really small endgame move that you feel like it's not time yet for, or a move that's really not threatening or really not necessary if you're defending, whether you're attacking or defending, right? So if you're attacking something that's not super necessary, if you're attacking something that's not super Sente or super aggressive, and yet it's, maybe raises the heat like 5%, or if you're defending something that secures something that's already pretty secure. I don't know. Those are my best guesses for this question. I would love to know your thoughts on that question. The next question I have, so these questions are kind of in two categories. The first few questions are more in the actual gameplay category, and then we'll move on to the meta world of Go improvement. So the second question I have that's more like related to the actual game is, for stronger players, do you ever play moves just to erase Aji in Gote? Now, I know multi-purpose moves are always better. If you can erase Aji and Sente, right? If you can take points while erasing Aji, if you could do something else while erasing Aji, it's always better. But if you don't have those moves, would you ever play a move just because it just cleans up a situation, even though it's Gote, even though it's slow? Is that something that you would do? Is that something that you should do? Do you think that's a matter of style and preference, or do you think that's like good practice, or do you think that you should never play such a passive move? I really, really struggle to play moves like this. I see Aji and I'm like, I'm a little nervous about it, but I just can't bring myself to play something that just erases the Aji and just adds a little thickness to my group and then turn over Sente to the other player. I just can't bring myself to do it. Is that the right mentality? Should I keep going that way, or should I come back and just be humble, play the move that completely erases any other possibilities in that situation and protects myself, and pass the baton to the other player? I honestly, I don't know the answer, but my body says don't do that. My body says, whatever you do, play an active move. Play something that does something. Don't just be protecting yourself. Obviously, defense moves, I think, are different than erasing Aji. Like, defense moves are like you have to play that move or you have a serious vulnerability. I'm talking about Aji, where there's something that can cause vulnerabilities later. And is it worth it to just play one more stone there to make sure that pesky little stone doesn't do anything? I don't know. I really don't. I'd love to know your thoughts. The next question I have is, what have you been more successful with in terms of the types of move and the flavor of move that you play? The get your money's worth attitude, trying to squeeze every last bit of value out of every last stone, or not every coin needs to be spent wisely to be well spent. Meaning, you play a lot of good enough moves. You play a lot of things that it's not 100% value squeezing. You're not getting the best deal. You're not getting the best bang for your buck for the stones that you're playing, but you know that you're going to live off of it. You're going to survive. You're going to get bread and butter off of it. You're going to get something out of it. What approach do you think has been more successful in your experience? Me, if you've listened to the last answer that I gave, you know that I kind of have this get your money's worth attitude. I really want to squeeze every last bit of value out of every last stone. And I struggle to play calm and slow moves. Maybe you have an opposite problem. Maybe you have this problem of always just playing calm and slow moves and you don't squeeze enough value out of your stones. But this is something I wonder, and this is something, should I change this? Should I maybe opt to play slower moves every now and then? Do you have an answer to this question? Or is it something that you also wonder? I mean, no. There's going to be a lot of these. You don't have to answer every question, although I fully invite you to write a super long essay going through all of these questions and answering them for me. Or you can pick whatever question you want and answer whatever you find interesting. But let's keep going. This is kind of a similar question, but more zoomed out. Should you try to juice your games for as many insights as possible per game, or just get the main points and move on? What's the better reviewing habit? Should you play a game and study it like it's like you're, I don't know, like a very, very intensive study session going from the beginning to the end, finding every flaw and vulnerability and trying to be very deep with it? Do you think that's the way? Or do you think it's better to play more games, get little main point review time in, and just take a game and look at exactly what I've been preaching on this show, right? The methodology that I've been kind of explaining on Starpoint, which is to go look at the game, because I know a lot of people don't have that much time, but to look at the game, find out the main points, what are the big mistakes, what's the plot of the game, and just move on after that. Or is it better to try to milk everything and just look at every little life and death situation, figure it out, and learn all the Josekis and all that stuff? What do you think is a better use of your time? Next one. What's a good thought process to follow when you feel like you're in a catch-22? I think a lot of people might relate to this question, but I find myself in this situation a lot where I've played a bunch of stuff, and I know your answer is probably going to be, well, don't put yourself in the catch-22, but maybe you're not in a catch-22. Right? I think a lot of times when we review a game and you hear the weaker player say something like, I didn't know what to play here because I wanted to play this, but I also needed to play that. The stronger player, their answer is a lot of the time is just like, oh, you don't have to care about this. Just go for this. And you're like, oh, okay. So just to elaborate a little bit more on what the catch-22 situation is, one common one I might find myself in is like opening to mid-game transition. And I'll have a weak group. And then I'll be like, I have to save this weak group. I have to jump out, or I might die, or I'm going to have to struggle with this weak group for the rest of the game. But if I do that, my opponent's going to take fourth line territory. So what do? I don't know. And I feel like Paduk Doctor in that situation going Coca-Cola. I don't know if anyone else has watched some Paduk Doctor or watched enough to know what I'm talking about, but he does this thing where he doesn't know what move to play and he goes Coca-Cola, and then he like chooses a random one. But in his case, it's more like these don't matter. Like whichever way you go, right? But for me, I feel like there may be an answer to the question, and I need to figure it out during the game. Like, what's more important? How do you figure that out when you feel like two things are equally important? What's a good, does anyone have a thought process that's a good way to really clarify the situation and judge what is a better thing to do? Like, I don't know. Is it like, is there a way to, I guess a follow-up question might be, how do you know when you can leave a group alone and not save it? I think that's a big question, actually. I didn't have that on my list, but that's a big question I would love answered. Man, if I get through this list, I'll be very thankful for any answers that come out. But any answers left unanswered, I will probably have to bring it back and repeat those questions, because I'm actually very curious what people think about all these questions. Okay, we're kind of moving into the meta territory now. So, regarding your personal experience in your improvement cycle and the history of like how you got to where you are, have you ever noticed a spike in improvement after a break from Go? Now, this is totally a confirmation bias question, but I have a theory that if you take a break from Go, sometimes it will lead to big gains when you come back, because that's kind of what happened to me. I kind of gave up on Go a little bit. I was like, you know what, Go, I'm not getting anywhere. I'm just going to not play for a while. And then I got sucked back into the game because I played it again. Somebody, like, I totally randomly ran into somebody who played Go. And I'm like, wow, we got to play. And then we played and I won. And I think I missed that feeling. I was like, oh man, I haven't been playing, but the fact that I won is like, it's invigorating. I got to get into this game. And then I just went bam, right into the game again. So I want to know if anybody else has had that experience. And obviously, if you're a weaker player too, if you're an SDK like me or even a DDK, have you experienced that? I would like to know. Or on the flip side, maybe this will reduce the confirmation bias. Have you noticed after a break some considerable rust or degradation of your game that you couldn't get back, or you felt like that hiatus really did you no good? Love to know either way. At your level, this is again for the stronger player. I mean, this whole episode is, but a lot of these questions I think even players at my level or weaker can answer, and they would provide interesting answers as well. And it would be great to actually have an open forum about this. Let's say, a weaker player answers one of these questions in one way, and then you guys can talk about it. That would be cool. But for the stronger players, I want to know, what are you personally not understanding or hoping to improve in your game? I think at every level, everyone's kind of looking up and seeing some mystery up there. So I'm wondering, what are you seeing from your level? From my level, again, I'm like 2Q OGS, flimsy 2Q, I would say. I feel like I know what it's important to do, but I don't have all the skills and tools to do what I need to do. Does that make sense? And this is both tactically and strategically. So tactically speaking, I think there are a lot of like local situations, life and death situations, and things like that just puzzle me. And I'm like, how do you get so much experience that you know what to do in this situation? You know whether this group is alive or dead. Because I do have some knowledge, obviously, over other players. I can tell, okay, that's dead, and that other player may not be able to tell. How do I get more of that knowledge? I mean, I guess it's the same answer for anything, but is there? I feel like it's asking more of me now. Before, I could just kind of play the game, do some basic life and death, but I feel like I need some more intensive study to get to that level. Is that true? And strategically speaking, I think that counting has really helped me understand a lot of the strategic aspects of the game, because, I'm a Fox player. I played a lot of fast games in the past, and I kind of took correspondence games with that mentality. I would play correspondence games almost as if I was playing a Fox like fast game. I wouldn't put too much thought into it. I would definitely not count, right? I wouldn't count during a Fox game. There's no time. You can only look at big areas and go like, oh, that looks like a lot. That's too much. Or you know what I actually do? My method is to just feel the little increments of victories and losses of trades throughout the game, because intuitively I feel that I'm making a whole bunch of trades that are either good for me or bad for me. And from that, I will have this like amalgamated estimate of I feel like I'm winning or I feel like I'm losing. That's kind of what I depend on in a Fox game. In addition to like just looking at the board and just gauging like how much territory it looks like. It served me pretty well. But when I go into the correspondence games, I never really thought to implement the higher level strategies that I could with all the time that I had until somewhat recently. And so with the correspondence games, I started counting, which I hate counting. Counting is so tedious. It's just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, blah, 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 blah. And it's not easy. It's like, it's a nightmare for some people, I think, who need definite answers. But you look at so many open borders and you look at so many areas where the life and death is questionable, and you have to figure out what's a good way to I might do an episode on what I think is a good way to estimate the score. But it's been really, really eye-opening for me to like stop the game at some point and realize like, oh, this is a situation that really matters as to like what the score is. Like the way I play right now, it really matters what the score is. And so therefore, I guess I got to go and count. And in those situations, like I feel like that has definitely added to my game and benefited me. Where was I going with this? What are you personally not understanding or hoping to improve? So I was thinking like in the strategy side. Okay, so that's kind of like the advancement that I made in strategy. But I don't know. I feel like there's an aspect of the game that I am failing to grasp, which is like how to implement my strategy maybe, or executing my strategy without creating liabilities. I don't know. I guess this is a really tough question to answer. So we'll move on. And this next question is kind of similar anyway. What was your last paradigm shift? And do you recall the one that sent you over to done? So for me, my last paradigm shift, I feel like that counting thing was a big paradigm shift change for me, the one that I just mentioned. I feel like I've been stuck in the same place for a while. Like I think this is maybe the longest plateau that I've had since like 12Q. This is probably longer than the plateau I had at 12Q. If you just count the amount of go time I'm spending. I think that my last paradigm shift is really just implementing strategy. I think that it's kind of like a no-brainer, right? You should think strategically when you're playing a strategy game. But Go is such an interesting and unique game that you can really get away with playing based on intuition and not thinking at all. And you can get very far that way. You can just play moves that are good, quote unquote good. Honte moves, just play this in this pattern, this in this pattern, and just it's like a heuristics-based playing shape moves, playing what you're supposed to play in all situations, and you'll be very good. But at some point, you got to start using your brain. And I think that's something that I have started. I'm like a baby in that regard. I've been starting to like wake up and I'm like, oh, hold on, I'm playing all these moves that I'm supposed to play and that are really good, but at the same time, like, I'm going like, actually, I can do a lot more. Like, I can see what's happening in the board, how the board is coming to be. And I can try to do things that are like higher level strategies. Like that seems so obvious, I feel like. But it's really a breakthrough that I had, I think, more recently. And I think I still really need to work on it to just kind of plan the game and, well, not plan like from A to Z, but have some kind of direction. Like, let me just sacrifice this group and I will take this chunk of territory, and that should be enough to win the game. That's such a basic thought, right? That's such a basic thing to think about. But these things, like, and there's, I think, more complicated ones that come up, like in an actual game. I'm just trying to riff here based on memory. But in an actual game, like these thoughts of like just zooming out and thinking like, okay, how much is this worth? Is this worth it? And weighing your options, and looking at how, I guess a lot of people call it whole board thinking, right? I think that's kind of been the latest breakthrough or paradigm shift that I've been going through, that I think I'm still going through and I still need to work on. But I'd love to know if you guys remember the one specifically that you were struggling with that sent you over into the world of the Dons. Or if you just remember your latest one. I'd love to hear higher level paradigm shifts. That would be an interesting thing to get into the mind of a stronger player. Got a few questions left. Was a study habit change a significant factor to any of your breakthroughs? So, did you do something differently in terms of how you studied the game? In terms of whether it was frequency or whether it was intensity or just what you were studying or how you were studying, was that kind of change a significant factor to getting strong for you? Or did you kind of do the same thing all the way through? For me, I've been switching things up a little bit, but it's really not been drastic. I don't think I've gone through a very intensive study change. I've definitely slacked at times, and I think I've improved while slacking too. I do recall one that I do talk about sometimes on the show, which is the period of time when I repeatedly did a set of easy problems, and I think that actually really boosted my game. So if you haven't tried that, try it. It's kind of like a woodpecker method thing, but for me, it didn't do if you don't know what the woodpecker method is, it's like a popular method in chess where you take a set of problems, you finish it all the way through, and you try to do it faster every time you go through it, and you do it repeatedly until you're proficient at it. And I don't really follow it exactly like that. It's not like I time myself, but what I did was I just kind of went through the problems again and again. And it's like some of the problems, they're just really easy. And some of the problems, it takes a second to think about, but you try, when you do it a second time, you realize, oh, like it's still taking me time to figure this out. And then you do it the third time, you're like, oh, okay, I kind of can do it a little faster. And so then you start to realize like you are soaking in certain pieces of knowledge. You're not just memorizing things. You are kind of understanding there are different ways to approach these problems. And so I think it's a good way. And I'm kind of trying to do that right now, but in a very slow way. Like there's a set of problems I'm doing on the Sumego app on my phone. And whenever I have some spare time, I just open that up and I work through the problems that I've already solved, but it's still taking me time to solve it a second time. So I'm going through that, and I'm going to keep going through it until it feels relatively easy. Some of the problems they really stumped me on the first time through, and the second time it maybe stumped me again. Maybe the third time I'm like, okay, this is not really stumping me, but it is taking a while. And so you can kind of see that progress in yourself, and it's a good way to learn shapes. It's a good, and I think it's like been one of the most effective ways to study for me. But I'd love to know if any kind of study habit change for you, and it doesn't have to be like actual study. It could be like how you play games, like how many games you play or how long of a game you play, like any kind of change or shift like that. I wonder if that contributed to a big breakthrough for you. In that vein, what was your longest plateau and what got you out of it? It's really hard to measure plateaus. I think if you go on OGS, you can see the graph. I love that on OGS you can switch your improvement graph from the number of games to the like actual time across the years. I think I'm more just interested in the number of games, but it's kind of hard to measure plateaus, especially if you're playing on different servers. And the thing is, like, there's also correspondence games added up in the OGS world. I feel like I can actually go into my journal. I wrote a journal, a Go journal, because I really needed an outlet to express my Go thoughts. But I didn't have one other than just writing stuff, so I wrote a journal, and now I have Starpoint, so I don't write my journal anymore, but I could probably go back and see what the longest stretch, because I would write my rank at every entry, and I can see it kind of go up. It's a really interesting thing to do. Okay, finally, last question for y'all strong players. What advice would you give to your DDK self? And what advice would you give to your SDK self? So for me, to my DDK self, I would say stop reading Lessons in the Fundamentals of Go. Put that down. Play more games. Stop taking the game so seriously and really just play. Try to get an enjoyment out of playing the game. And then check back. And then compare your findings with some YouTube videos, with Otake's Opening Theory Made Easy, and Yilun Yang's Fundamental Principles of Go, and play more games. Do problems, play games, get experience. It's the whole lose your first 50 games as fast as you can type of thing. Oh, I would also, depending on how far back we go, I would say, stop trying to beat that one bot on OGS. I don't know if that's really doing much for you. Maybe it did. Maybe that did help me improve to a certain degree. I don't know. It's been so long. There was a bot called Kugutsu that I used to play again and again, trying to win against it. I don't think it's available to play anymore, because otherwise I would want to play it again to see like what that level was. But yeah, I would mostly just say play more, because I think I was really reluctant to play. And it took me a while to realize that I can just play more games, and that actually gives me so much more experience. So I want to know what you would say to your DDK self or to your SDK self. And like, it's like personal advice, right? Something that you would tell your young self. So I'm curious to know what you guys think of that. So those are the questions. It's quite a doozy list of questions, and I'd love to know your thoughts on any of those. So much appreciated if people out there have answers for me. Let's learn to watch Paduk TV. All right, today is a quiz day, pop quiz review day. Let's see how much you remember. I'm going to go through some words that I've taught you over the past few weeks in this segment and see if you remember what they mean. First word, 인공지능. This word's said a lot on Paduk TV, or whatever pro, go, casting, Korean casting that they have. 인공지능. Take a guess. If you said AI, you're correct. Now, next word is pick and hook. Now, that's already a hint. There's two, pick and hook. If you know that pick is white and hook is black, you are correct. Give yourself a pat on the back. Next word, 날일자. This is one of the first ones, I think. One of the very early ones that I taught you. 날일자. 날일자 means knight's move. If you said large knight's move, I'm sorry, that's 눈먹자. 날일자 is knight's move. And then finally, 선수. 선수. If you said this means sente, that is correct. And for a bonus point, if you also say the alternate meaning of 선수, it means player. If you got that, give yourself another point, and let me know how you did on the quiz. I've always wanted a very strong player to just take me under their wing and diagnose my issues and tell me, Justin, you got to do 100 Tsumego problems every day, and then play a game, show me the game, and tell me everything you did wrong. And, you know, that kind of thing. And no one ever did that for me. But I realize now that that's not so easy to do for anybody. Like if a DDK player came to me for advice, I would struggle with like how to guide them, I think. I would provide value, I think, but it's not as easy as it seems, I think, I always think that like the stronger players are holding some kind of secrets from us, and they're just like not telling us how to be better. But that's not the case. It's like you don't even understand why you're better. It's like you can explain all you want, everything that you know, but it's just like you can't necessarily cleanly transfer the strength from one person to another just by talking to them. Like it's something you earn and experience and learn for yourself. And that's part of what makes Go so beautiful. But now it's time for the DDK Advice Corner. And the tip of the day is, if you have two ways to live, don't play either of them. So if you got a group or a stone and you realize that, oh, I can live either by connecting up or I can live by making a second eye here. Don't do either of them. If you have two options, don't play one of those moves in Gote and waste a move, because if your opponent threatens one side or another, you can play the other side. That's called miai. That's what miai is. So don't waste a Gote move. If you have options to live, play something else. But just be careful that while you're doing those other things, that because things change, that you might get caught up in that other thing and you forget about that initial group that has to live. And suddenly you've taken away one of those options, and now your opponent plays the other option and your group is dead. Just be careful of that situation and be mindful. But if you have two ways to live, why play either of them? You can play that later. And now it's time for listener mail. Jules writes, I'll reply here about a bunch of different episodes. On the episode about Go adjacent board games, there's one that nobody mentioned and that I'm happy to share. It was one of my favorite board games as a child, and I saw a similar appeal when I started Go. It's called Cathedral. You can look it up on Wikipedia, Cathedral board game. Let me go ahead and search that right now. Cathedral board game. I've never heard of it, so that's why let's see. Ooh, it looks somewhat familiar. I feel like I've seen this thing. So there's like a grid and a bunch of like castle pieces made of wood. The castles, they kind of remind me of... So I had this Monopoly set growing up that was like a fancier Monopoly. Because you know how in Monopoly the houses and hotels are plastic? But the one that I had, they were made of wood. And that's what it kind of reminds me of. It also reminds me of this awesome game that I played called Cube. It is a Swedish game. I want to make sure I credit the right country. It is Swedish. Yes, it's a Swedish lawn game, but the king piece from that game looks like some of these pieces. I'm getting sidetracked. The game is simple. It is played on a grid. The two players have a set of buildings of various sizes. Think of Tetris pieces, with the biggest taking 5 squares and the smallest 1 square. They take turns placing one of their buildings on the grid, and the goal is to surround areas. Once an area is surrounded, it is the property of that player, and the opponent's buildings in this area are removed. The goal is to place down more buildings than the opponent, and to do that, one needs to claim areas big enough for all their buildings. Sounds familiar, innit? Yes, it does. That also kind of reminds me of the Lisa Doll game, The Great Kingdom? Oh, I already forgot the name of it. It also reminds me of that one arcade game, the ancient arcade game where you claim territory. What was it called? You guys know what I'm talking about? There's like you're like a little spaceship and it draws a line, and you start from the edge of the screen, and if you make a closed loop, it solidifies that. There's a bunch of IO games now that are kind of like that. But there's the OG one, and your little ship, it draws a line, and you can try to take a huge chunk of territory by going all the way across the screen. But the problem with that is if the other player crashes into you or something, or you, like, it blocks your way and you crash into one of their lines or something like that, you die and you lose. But that game, you guys probably either know or don't know what I'm talking about, but it reminds me of that as well. Okay, continuing. The game has a nice catch, the cathedral. A neutral building bigger than all the others placed at the beginning. The cathedral and every adjacent building cannot be removed, hence the area the cathedral is in is always neutral. I advise everybody to try that one out. It's as if Go was only about surrounding and not capturing. Plus, the game is beautiful to look at. Every building has a different shape, and when they are all placed on the grid, it looks like a tiny medieval town. Yeah, just from looking at the picture, it does look like a beautiful game. And the fact that you're saying that it looks like a little town after you're finished, it does remind me of Go, and also reminds me of the one game I mentioned, Carcassonne. Somebody mentioned combining chess and Go. I don't know how it could be done, but it made me think of a fun activity at the European Go Congress last year. Two teams of two face each other. On the table, there's a chessboard and a 13x13 Goban. Members of the same team play their move simultaneously, one on the chessboard, the other on the Goban, hit the clock, and switch their place. So it's basically playing Rengo and Rengo chess. Ren chess? Yeah, I would call it Ren chess. Did you know that Sumego means... I don't know what it means, but it means Go problems, right? But in Shogi, they're called Sume Shogi. So theoretically, you could call it Sume chess. At the same time. Okay, it's pretty fun, and 13x13 is close to chess in terms of number of moves. I would be interested in playing that because I'm a casual chess player. I absolutely suck at chess, but I find it enjoyable. And that would be an interesting experience. On another episode, continuing. On another episode, you read some post about beginners struggling to get into the game. I believe most of us related to that. I think it stems mainly from the distance between the moment you make a mistake and the moment you get punished. When I began Go, I felt like playing dice. I had no idea how any of my moves would affect the outcome of the game, and when the outcome was good, it was mostly an accident. For a beginner, the game is super cryptic, especially on big boards. Yeah, I totally agree, and I think the thing is with Go, you definitely need some guidance when you're starting out. You can't just start out. I feel like in chess, you can kind of wing it in the beginning. Your moves may look silly, especially to advanced players, but you can kind of just move your pieces and see them disappear and go, oh wow, I captured you, you captured me, boo, and then, I don't know, maybe your game doesn't necessarily end in checkmate, but I feel like you're still kind of playing. Whereas in Go, it's like, I feel like you really do need some direction as to like how you're supposed to start playing. And I don't think it's like a game where you just like explain the rules and it's like, okay, go have fun now. It's like, I think you need to like handhold a little bit and say like, hey, try to go for the corners, try to go for the sides and then the center, and make bases and then those fundamental things. Continuing, I never got into that phase again. Not that I ever plateaued, But I never told myself I had no idea what I was doing. There's a few things I did to permanently grow out of that phase. I don't know if they're universal, but I'll share anyway. 1. Playing with much stronger players with or without handicap. Why? Because they will punish obvious mistakes instantly instead of waiting for the yosei like the AI does. That's true, that's one big point about AI. You may make some huge mistake, but the AI is like, not worth my time. Which, like, it's wise in its own right as well, but it's not human, right? Humans will look at it like this giant killable group and go, oh, it's time to kill. And I think people need some of that. After having my Keimas cut 3 times, I started anticipating it, and it rarely took me by surprise since then. Or placing on the second line a stone that can instantly be Atari'd and captured. Another beginner won't punish mistakes, hence you can't learn from them. These are very true. 2. Talking and exchanging. It's my opinion that doing nothing but playing isn't the best way to progress. Meeting Go players IRL and exchanging with them over the board gave me a much better understanding of the game. As a beginner, I tried to save all my stones, and I was surprised to hear stronger players say, when I pointed at one of their stones, meh, she can capture it, I don't care. It's a stone of yours, how could you not care? Well, through these exchanges, now I understand. That's true, that's something I personally need more of, more discussion, and I think a lot of like the OG Go players lament and mourn the loss of the KGS community, because from what I hear, the KGS community was exactly like this. Everybody just kind of getting together to discuss games, and OGS doesn't really have that same culture. You can find some of it on Reddit, but yeah. 3. And I might sound like a broken record because it's not the first time I mentioned this book on the show, reading Opening Theory Made Easy. As I said, the big boards were super cryptic to me as a beginner, and after reading this book, I felt like a blind man opening his eyes for the first time. That book made me jump from 20Q to 13Q on OGS. I stopped placing stones on the 6th line thinking I could get all the territory. I spot the potential enclosures, extensions, and understand why they're important. The beginning has hundreds of possibilities, and it's mostly thanks to that book I am no longer intimidated by them. That's it for my long email. Thanks for the podcast, Justin. Have a good day. Thank you so much for your email, Jules. It was very enjoyable to read, and you actually had a lot of really nice insights in here, and I really agree with the Opening Theory Made Easy. In fact, it's probably like the antidote for beginners who are just flailing, right? It gives you a solid foundation to stand on as a player, and then you can work after that on everything else. But without this opening theory stuff, it's like you're just flinging stones at the board and hoping things happen, and then you start to read, and like it doesn't really make sense. But I definitely second that recommendation as well. Andy G2G writes, "Hey Justin, I've been meaning to ask this question for a while now, but it always slips my mind. Since you are clearly more familiar with the Korean language than I am, perhaps you can shed some light on this one. What is the correct pronunciation of Baduk in Korean? I know it's spelled, at least in the English alphabet, with a B, but it always sounds like you're making more of a P sound, as in Baduk. Is this actually the case, or are my ears just broken? Thanks again for the great content." Okay, this is something I actually think about a lot, because I took a linguistics course in college, and I learned a bunch of technical terms, and while I was there, I thought about Korean phonetics, and I came to the conclusion that this B that we're talking about, this B/P, is a vocalized, aspirated plosive sound. Vocalized meaning there's a voice in it. So if you're thinking about letters and consonants, some letters have voices and some letters don't. Like a voiced letter would be the letter V. The F does not have a voice. It's just air. There's no vibration of the vocal cords. So likewise, in the letter B, we kind of voice the beginning of that b. There's a vocal cord activation there. And then the P has no voice. It's just air, right? But There's another difference between B and P. One is that the B is not aspirated and the P is aspirated. So if you can think about the letter K is aspirated because there's a breath after the K sound, like you have to put a breath after the K, K. But the letter G, 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 there's no breath there. It's all voice. So what I'm saying is the B in Baduk is vocalized and aspirated, meaning you have to put the voice in there like a B, ba, 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 but you also have to put in the breath right after, ba, ba, ba. And it ends up sounding like a P to a lot of people because people aren't used to hearing the aspiration on the B. And to be honest, I don't always pronounce it perfectly, and sometimes I might say something more like Paduk, sometimes I might say something more like Baduk. And, you know, as long as you get the point across, right? But that is my answer to the question, is that you got to put in a little voice like a B, but also put in a breath like a P, and that's why those two get mixed up. Although in my head, it is very much a B, and I think I really agree with the B letter pronunciation. But another thing I learned in linguistics is that you can't really control how people say things. People will just say things the way they say it, and that's how language develops. Chess wasn't chess, right? It was like shamat or something, and something before that, and eventually became chess. And so I know a lot of people pronounce this word as like baduk, right? Baduk. It's very not. I mean, if you go to Korea and you say, "Oh, do you guys know where like there's a baduk salon?" They will not know what you're talking about. I have a funny story from when I was young. And like my family, all being Korean, they were all looking for a McDonald's. And me being like this like young bilingual kid who was raised in Korean, and yet I started going to school, so I learned English. I actually thought of McDonald's as two different words, one in Korean and one in English. And so we were looking for a restroom somewhere. Well, in Canada, we would call it a washroom. And my family was asking strangers, "Where is McDonald? Where is McDonald?" That's how it's McDonald. That's how you would say McDonald. Where is McDonald? That's how they would pronounce it. And they would ask these people, and everyone would be like, "I don't know what you're talking about, man." And my family was all just confused, like, how does no one know where McDonald's is? And I spoke up and I was like, "It's because you guys are asking them in Korean." And they're like, "What are you talking about? We're asking in English." And I was like, "You're saying McDonald. That's not how you say it." And they're like, "How do you say it?" And I'm like, "It's McDonald's." And they all started cracking up, and they're going like, McDonald's, and they're trying to say it the way I say it. But it's, I actually don't remember that. I've been told that story many times by my family members. But case in point here, if people start saying baduk, and that's how they say the word go for go in Korean, and it just evolves into that, and like, I don't know, maybe like in the future, like a few centuries from now, people just call it duk or something. I don't know. So that's just all language, but if you're curious, that's my answer, and you've clearly, if you can't tell, struck a certain nerve in me, or chord, I don't know what you would call it, but something that I'm very interested and passionate about. So thank you very much for asking that question. Hopefully my answer is satisfactory. Sadaharu writes, on Black Box Thinking, "That's an interesting book. By the way, your question about finding the pattern of the numbers sounds very familiar. If I'm not wrong, Veritasium has a video on the exact same question and phenomenon. If I believe you're talking about the 246 pattern number. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to 85 Black Box Thinking. It's in the beginning of the episode anyway. I feel like this author borrowed from a lot of different sources and had a lot of popular ideas in it. So, and I think it's a book from like 2015. So I wouldn't be surprised if Veritasium also had a video on that. And I always love those little brain trick things. And continuing. In the olden days, I liked to review the games I won more because it felt good. Reviewing the games I lost not only brought back the pain, but it felt pointless reviewing because it was so hard to find the reason for the loss by myself. However, nowadays, with the help of AI, I find it more useful to review the games that I've lost. I can clearly see the places where I made big mistakes, and I can always compare my thoughts with the AI. Looking through the games that I won is also helpful because it gives me confidence upon finding out that what I did was correct. It also brings us back to the question, which is more helpful for improvement, fixing your weaknesses or improving upon your strengths? I'm so happy that you said that you used to like to review games that you won more because it felt good, because I totally relate to that, and I'm trying to fix that. And if you were once like that, then that gives me hope. And I also feel like AI, although a lot of people kind of shun it, it really is this crazy tool that helps us as long as you kind of use it the right way and you know not to abuse it and you know not to depend on it too much and you kind of understand how AI works, then it can be helpful. And the question that you asked at the end there, which is more helpful for improvement, fixing your weaknesses or improving upon your strengths. Yeah, I've heard this question many times over the years, and I've always kind of been slightly more in the fixing your weaknesses camp. I feel like I don't know, your strengths are just going to be your strengths, and like I don't know how much you can really feed your strengths all that much more. They're just going to be naturally your strong spots. So why not work on your weak spots, the things that are uncomfortable? I feel like you're probably weak at them because you're not comfortable with practicing them. I don't know. This is a good question. I'll add that question to the list of all the questions that I asked today. And for the question of the week, take your pick. This whole episode is questions, so I'd love to know your thoughts on any or all of the questions. So if you'd like to share your thoughts on those questions, or if you have a ghost story to share, or have a question you want to ask me, or you have a question for strong players to ask, leave a comment wherever you found this episode, or email me at starkpointpaduk@gmail.com. That's starkpointbaduk@gmail.com. If you are a YouTube listener, I would greatly appreciate a like and a subscribe if you haven't already. If you're a podcast listener, reviews and ratings also help. A very special thank you to James B. and Tristan for supporting Starpoint. And if you want to support the show, go to ko-fi.com/starpointpaduk, that's KO-FI, or check out the Starpoint store at store.starpointpaduk.com. Some of you may not know this, but it's still Easter season, and one of the questions I want to ask before Easter season comes to an end is, what's the best Go move to play during the Easter season? A peep. Because I wonder if peeps exist in other places besides the United States. If they don't, you guys might be very confused, but it's like a marshmallow and it's eaten during Easter. Thanks for listening. Keep playing Go.